At their feet, story time. All right, you guys ready? So today we're going to be reading some story 39, Sister Ameedah Rashid, who was born Ginger Ann Mason. All right, this story was told to and prepared by Ameedah Rashid. All right, she says, I was born in Riverside, California in 1953. My birth name, Ginger, is actually from my paternal grandmother, Virginia. Ann was for my maternal grandmother, Rebecca Ann. So I was named Ginger Ann, which, by the way, is a very good Islamic name. I could have been Zanjabel, ginger in Arabic, or I could have left it as Ginger, but I didn't know that at the time. I was raised Christian, but my father believed that everybody should pick their own religion. My mother was raised and stayed her whole life in a very fundamentalist Christian faith called the Church of Christ. It was actually very similar to Islam in that they didn't listen to music. Ladies wore skirts and dresses only, and it was very conservative. That's how my mother was raised, and that's the state in which she died. My father actually died a Buddhist. His whole life he did different things. For example, he tried to be Methodist and went to different churches. I was raised in Nashville, Tennessee, in the segregated South. I was raised in the black world, so to speak. I think that there was a segment on In Living Color called Black World or something, and I thought, oh, that's how I was raised. Nashville was a professional town. Black people worked at Fisk University and Tennessee State University. My grandfather was a well-known doctor, and my grandmother was a school principal. My father was a teacher. My mother was a housewife until she divorced, and then she went back to do some training as a secretary at Fisk. But my mother was very active in civil rights. She worked for Alexander Luby and a lot of other people and was a secretary for the NAACP in Nashville. Bombings and things like that were a part of our reality. She was very involved, but my father was not. He babysit while she went to do stuff like that. My parents thought that the Catholic school's educational system was better, so I went to Catholic school for educational reasons. I became Catholic in about the third or fourth grade, and I was a devout Catholic until college. My brother was Baptist because he played on a Baptist baseball team. I was in high school in the late 60s and the early 70s. Life changed and desegregation became part of the day, even in Tennessee. Around 1971, one of the major high schools integrated for the first time. I had an extremely violent, racist ninth grade experience and later was able to finally convince my mom to let me leave. It was actually, like a prep school, but I experienced extreme racism there, the type you don't even want to talk about. For my 10th, 11th, and 12th grade years, I went to a Catholic school with a mixed student body, so I didn't have that kind of oppression and brutality. For college, I went to Fisk. My mother worked at Fisk, so I could go tuition free. I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go away like everybody else. But we couldn't afford that because my parents divorced when I was in the fourth or fifth grade. My mother raised me as a single parent from that point forward, so we just didn't have a lot of money to go away to school. But education was always first in her life and in ours. When I left Fisk, I went to the University of Michigan for graduate school. Then I worked for a year, and I eventually went back to the University of Michigan for my second master's degree. After I graduated with my first master's, my first job was being the director of a rape crisis center. That was like my introduction in a big way to the feminist movement. I was a very strong feminist. A lot of people became Muslim, especially women, because their husbands are Muslim or they're influenced. But that wasn't the case for me. I remember our offices were on the third floor of the YWCA, and the next floor was Planned Parenthood. One of my good friends was the director of Planned Parenthood. Her secretary was Muslim. Being Muslim then was kind of like now, in the sense that your style of dress could be easily overlooked as Afrocentric. It wasn't like anybody was in a kimar or a niqab or anything like that. But that secretary would do some of the most fabulous gaylays and afros. She said, You know, you're really into women's issues. I want you to hear someone speak because he's going to be talking about women throughout the ages. It's a series. Turns out the speaker was Warthin Muhammad. He used to do a Sunday hookup, which lasted for about 3 hours or so, and I did not want it to stop. It was incredible. He talked about the history of women in religion. He looked at the three major religions and he looked at the role of women. But when he got to Islam, he was talking about women in a way that was really women's liberation. You could have your own name and your own income. He talked about Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her. He talked about all kinds of things in their historical context, but in the specific context of African American women. Because basically, if you were a woman, Islam was for you. So that was a turning point for me to look at Islam as a way of life. I loved it because the people were almost like the way I was raised, where community and family were not separate. It was a part of your life, and so it was for me too. That's not the whole thing. But she goes into marrying this old man. Maybe I'll tell that story in a minute. But she goes into this, her first marriage and such. So that is a little bit about Sister Ameedah Zakiya Rashid and how she grew up in this family that was like multi-religious, interfaithish, you know, Catholic, Buddhist, Baptist, all of that. And how she found Islam through a secretary at her job. All right. That's it for today, guys.